Ashley Hayes Wright directs Monster Tapes, a 2025 low-budget creature in the woods movie. Now, this has kind of been marketed or sort of positioned like it's a found footage movie. It is not a found footage movie. What it is a very, very low budget family made film. So the Wright family are a group of people who make low budget movies. I believe they've got a farm out, you know, wherever it is they live in America somewhere. And they've made a bunch of kind of low budget, either religious type movies and a few horror films. I believe I have reviewed at least one of their films previously. And this is another one. Yeah, but for some reason it's kind of made out like it's a found footage film. It really isn't. And it focuses primarily on these two teenage girls who are doing an investigation, you know, to look into this kind of legend and this monster, this Bigfoot style creature which is said to be out in these woods. And there's this kind of previous guy that's gone out to try and hunt for this creature. There's a smattering of other characters, some hunters, some military types, but it primarily focuses on these two girls, and inevitably, you know, we find out what's behind this kind of monster and stuff, and we get a little bit of action with our kind of like military types. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about what works in this movie's favour. Don't worry, this section won't take very long. For the clearly ultra low budget movie that it is, I'll say it's very ambitious. It is very ambitious. And the ambition you can clearly see by the scale of the movie that they're trying to make. We have military involvement here, or some type of paramilitary force with helicopters and tanks. How that is achieved, hold your horses, we'll talk about it. But nonetheless, there is some degree of ambition here. The kind of the creature effects, hold your horses. There's going to be a B-side to this. You know, you could arguably say that it looks alright in a couple of shots. I'll say that. But that's it. That is it. That is the end of that section. Alright, so why preface my positives with those negatives? Okay, so a lot of this movie is achieved via AI. And the military side of stuff, the monster, it's achieved by AI. And they're incorporated with a few scenes with, you know, actors. So yes, we have, you know, army types with including hardware. You could arguably say yes, there's certainly ambition there, and you know, I would say to a degree, you could certainly say the inclusion of like tank or helicopter and stuff, those sequences may be incorporated reasonably well into the movie. So when it comes to say, like let's say the military hardware, it looks okay. The monster effects, it looks a little cartoonish, but arguably you could say, you know, there's a couple of maybe even still shots where I think that looks alright. But, you know, it's AI. It's the early days of AI in kind of movies. And, you know, I think when you're talking in 5 years' time, probably 2030, maybe even before that. I'm recording this in 2025. You know, we'll look back on these early attempts at incorporating AI into kind of certainly low budget movies, and it's gonna like look awful, and it kind of still does. You know, it might be easy to kind of do this on a very, very low budget and have these what would have otherwise, you know, 5-10 years ago would have been more elaborate CGI sequences that you would have had to have designed and made. Now you can just get an AI bot to do it for you. But it's, you know, they never look quite right. The way they are moving, the kind of the anatomy of characters doesn't look quite right. They seem to sort of change, and it looks kind of ropey, rubbery, and anatomy seems to kind of change in front of your eyes and things like this. And the human characters don't look like you know, like humans, quite right, very uncanny valley. That's where we are with it at the moment, and I think there's this rush with kind of low budget filmmakers having now found a way they can incorporate more big ideas into their films with a low budget, and I've seen it, you know, within the last year of doing these reviews where this has been incorporated, and it's, you know, and I think in the rush to kind of get like big ambition out in low budget films, they're being added, and you know, it isn't good, and I think that the technology isn't quite there yet. Does a low budget filmmaking crew like the Wrights really care? Probably not. And arguably you could say, you know, there's a couple of, if you took some screenshots out of this movie, you'd probably say, oh, that looks quite impressive. But when you see it put together, I mean, it clearly looks, like, when you look at the quality difference and the difference in kind of films between the live action sequences with the two daughters compared to the AI things, they look completely different. The cinematography with the AI is very, very dark, and I presume to try and hide the imperfections, they've kind of darkened it and stuff, but you can barely see what's going on in a lot of these kind of sequences. But it still kind of looks like AI, you know, and the scenes don't really make sense, these AI sequences. It looks like the computer spat out a bunch of kind of like AI like little sequences, and they've tried to like edit them together to kind of make some type of cohesive sense. It doesn't really. It's just like people with guns shooting. You know, there's no real like actual storytelling with it. It looks like a bunch of scenes that are kind of like, okay, we've got all these scenes, we'll edit out the bits that look really bad, and we'll try and stitch together what looks like a coherent sequence, but it doesn't really work, you know, and if the effects look too bad, we'll just like bring the lighting like way down and try and hide it, and you know, it's a bit of a mess. But what you're saying about the live action sequences? Well, that's mostly sort of these two girls, and like, you know, no disrespect to these young girls, the acting isn't solid. You know, these aren't trained actors. This is someone's, and they've made a career out of it clearly because the Wright family have made, like, you know, quite a few films at this point. So clearly someone's watching them, but you know, these are obviously not trained actors. They are just a family making films maybe for fun, and I can appreciate that. I mean, fair play. This is a family that you know, have got together as a family to make films, and clearly someone's watching them. So I can't knock that. But as a viewer watching this, are you going to be entertained? No. Not unless you are like a friend or a family member or something like that. Or you've just got into this completely without knowing any of this, and you're thinking, what am I watching? But then you ain't enjoying it, I would wager. But yeah, it's just like long sequences of these two girls just talking, you know, without really much plot. You know, they find, like, they're going out looking for evidence of this monster or this previous kind of guy that's gone out, and they find a phone, and that's conveniently not locked, which can, you know, there's no like security on the phone, or there's no like password. They can get into it straight away. What phone is like that now, anyway? But yeah, and that will kind of lead them down the path of discovering, you know, the key to what's going on here. The film is mercifully fairly short. It's about an hour in length, so it's, you know, it doesn't outstay its welcome at least. But really, unless you are somehow connected to the people involved in this movie, or you're curious to see how AI is being incorporated in this very low budget, and I would say early stages of this technology, then I would suggest there's much to recommend this movie about. And in all honesty, when I'm kind of looking at it in the cold light of day, even as with a low budget mindset, I really can't really give you much to actually recommend this. There's not really, you know, it's not clever. It's not clever writing. It's kind of, or acting, or cinematography, or, you know, use of limited resources. It's just, there's nothing here really I can say in a legitimately positive way, which leads me to the score. It's a 1 out of 10. Bad. Anyway, what were your thoughts if you used it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.